Hi cosplay fans, Cosplay Vicky here. In today's video I'm going to talk to you about how I put together my chest box for Lord Vader. I asked recently on YouTube what kind of videos would you like to see more of, and the response was quite simple: more Vader making videos. So there's a lot of people out there that reach out to me through Instagram or YouTube just saying, could you give us a little bit more information on this part of your costume? And what I've never covered is the chest box. Now, there are lots of options out there to buy chest box kits. People do runs of 25 or 50 of a chest box. I've even seen one recently which was all metal chest box, which would be very heavy for cosplaying. And obviously that was never what David Prowse wore when filming the original Empire Strikes Back, which is what my costume is based on. So I thought I would just walk you through how I made my chest box. Now, I recently bought a new 3D printer. I've updated my 3D printer. My CR10 has gone, and now I have a Creality Endor S1 with a larger build plate, which means I can print helmets and other parts of costumes, which I'm really excited about. I've also got, just out of shot, the Creality resin printer. I'm not quite sure what the number is of it now. It's couple of years old, but that's what I've been using for the last couple of years to make all of my costumes, including my chest box. Now, I will open this up and I'll slowly kind of walk through what I've got and how I've done it. And then I want to talk to you about the products that I've used to make it. And I've done a couple of test prints just to show you what you could do if you have got your own 3D printer. To print the chest box is not straightforward. I want to talk through with you the pros and cons of different ways of printing something like this, where you don't really want any infill inside because you want to fill that with stuff, but neither do you want to kind of damage the surface. So I'll talk you through different ways of printing. I've also got all the little greeblies here. I'm going to talk through my thought process behind the greeblies. Now, all of these STL files, if you go into the show notes, you'll see a link to a Dropbox. In that Dropbox, I've got all my 3D printer files. If you want to print your own using my files, that is perfectly fine. I'd love you to do that. Just give me the honour of seeing what you've made afterwards. Let me see what you've made. Don't just take them and kind of never show me. I'd love to see either through Instagram or through YouTube what you've put together. Right, let's do a bit of a deep dive then into my chest box. Where do you start? Well, my chest box has a back on it, which I 3D printed myself. And you can see on this chest box here, I have a 3D printed back on. This 3D printed back comes off. It's held with screws in the corner. But what this allows me to do, I have access to my MP3 player. It also allows me, this is an older version. The version that I've got here, I've also got access to the on and off switch for the speaker that goes in my chest box. So the breathing comes from my chest box as well. But the key thing is I've got the strapping going through these as well. So the chest box is strapped with the leather straps through those. So when that goes on my chest, I'm essentially putting it on a little bit like a harness, and then it sits on me quite nicely. But I have a back, and through the back I can then access what I need to access inside. So depending on what you want to do with your MP3 player or with the lights in your chest box, you might want to kind of wire this up differently. The neat thing is that just pops on the back, and then you put your 4 screws in the corner. And my chest box has holes for the 4 screws as well. Now the tip for the 4 screws is this. I heat up the screws just slightly with a soldering iron so they're warm. I then screw them in, and it creates the thread, the plastic that melts around the screws, and then that nicely holds them in place. And that's the way that I've done it on this one and all the other boxes and chest boxes that I've done before, where you're basically creating your own thread. So I heat up the screw. So chest box, all the greeblies. My rule is, if it's metal, I try to get the metal part to make it look a bit more realistic. So the bars that you see on the side here, they're from Fenix Props, same place that I got my cape from. Also the same place that I got my belt buckle from, that kind of thing. So Fenix, F-E-N-I-X, Fenix Props. Got them from there. They were super cheap. You know, for what they are, I think they're a really good value, and I think they sell the chest box. In the future, I'm going to make another chest box, and what I would like to do is also get the other metal pieces that are on here to go on as well. So it's all those bits are all metal. The chest box. Let me talk about the printing of the chest box then. This will be helpful for you. So some bits of the chest box, like the switches, I printed them out of PLA. Things like the coin slots and the other greeblies, I printed those using resin. When you come to small details, tight details, resin printing is far better than PLA printing. PLA is your plastic printing on a printer like the Endor S1. Resin gives you nice, sharp prints right from day one. They don't need as much finishing. So greeblies, all the little details, I do in resin. Now you can do those in PLA. Can do it, it just takes a little bit more work. And it's harder to get those tight square edges as well. But large printing like this, I do on my PLA printer. Now there are two different ways of printing the actual chest box. Let me talk this through, and I have both options for you here. Well, there's actually three options. One I don't have because it was garbage. Okay, option number one is to simply print it like that on the print bed. The problem is you then need infill. I don't want infill because I want to be able to put all my gubbings and my amps in. I don't want to pull it out and have all that horrible edge in there. So what I did was I printed one using little triangular stilts, just like this. Let me come around and show you. A little triangle stilt. With the plan of trying to minimize drooping in the print. So if you're going to print like that, you're going to end up with drooping if you don't have something in there to hold it up. I did print one with those. Actually, I still wasn't happy with it. I ended up just binning that because I wasn't happy. So the two options that you really have, one, this one, where you'll see there's just some slight print lines on the front of there, but not many, was printed like that on the print bed. The lines that you can see are because I love to put masking tape on the print bed. It's an easier way of removing your prints and you get a nice surface. So I printed this one like that. You get a really nice print like that. The only trade-off you get is actually the chest box isn't flat. The original chest box was not made, mass production like this, it was handmade. I believe it was made out of wood. If you know any different, I'd love to hear that. But it wasn't completely flat, and one of the edges is slightly higher than the other edge. So when you come to print it on your print bed, to get it flat on the print bed, you've got to trade off with. So if you say, well, is that 100% accurate, Chris? The answer is no, because this is flat. Nobody notices. Only those that have ever seen the original would notice that the original isn't flat. This one isn't flat like this one because this one I printed the sides, okay? I then printed the top level on the print bed, and this lid was then glued to the sides. With this, you can sand down all the edges and you can't see that there's a seam around it. Now, there's a win to this option that there isn't with this option. The win is with this option, I've been able to print this, what do you call it, like a little ledge that the buttons can sit in, okay? So I know that's exactly where they go. And some of these little greeblies can fit inside there as well. So that's a guide to exactly where they go, and you can pop a bit of glue in there and it will stick and it will not come off because you've actually got it's fitted into an actual socket, okay? Printing this way up, means you can have these little ledges where all your pieces then nicely fit in. Okay? So you know they're square. This version, and both versions are in my Dropbox, you'll see both of them. This version, you can't print that like this. It just doesn't work. For those of you that do 3D printing, know that you would need to put some infill in there, and then pulling it out would be a nightmare, and it'd be horrible to clean up. So this version, which is actually what I did on my own one, with this version, there are no guides. So I created my own little template, drew it out, and then I just glued the parts once they were cleaned up, once they were finished with spray putty. This is a spray putty I use, simple spray putty. It's the cheapest spray putty I can find out there. It's about £6 a can on Amazon, and I love it. It's really good. I glue those bits on. I glue the other greeblies on once I'd painted them. Okay, and then I would do the kind of the final print. Weather pass, that kind of thing, because it's not matte black. It's got all the bits, the scuff marks on. So with this, you don't get the marking lines, but you do get a really nice flat surface. I decided, because I knew where I wanted to put all of the pieces, I would print it this way around. So I printed my original one that way up. That way I got a much neater, cleaner print, although the surface is completely flat. I'm fine with that, and I'm happy with that. If you're a nerd for detail, you may want to print a version like this where the surface isn't quite level, and it's actually got the raised edges on it. So that's the container that you're going to put everything in. That's printed in PLA. All my little greeblies are then on resin. I have no particular rule about what resin I buy. I just buy whatever's the cheapest resin on sale online at that point. Right, let's just quickly talk about the leather. The leather is all come from Fenix Props as well. I found that they got these at that point online, so I actually picked these up on Fenix as well, and you just kind of screw them in. That's all good. A couple of more things on the surface. So you'll see that there's the blue, the red button, these white buttons. To do that, I used regular vinyl. You can pick this up on Amazon. It comes in these 30 by 30 squares, and they're very, to get the right colour is important, but I tended to find that very standard vinyl red and blue was the right colour. I cut this all out with what I've got is a silhouette cameo. Some people have a cricket, that kind of thing. I cut out all of these pieces on there. Having done that, I ended up cutting the blue and red squares again. Now, the reason I did that was I realised that I could just put the lid of the box onto the vinyl, cut around it with a craft knife, and it was perfect size. So that's what I did for these two red switches. But for these ones, I'd use my cricket to cut them out so they were nice and sharp for me, all identical, and that kind of jazz. So let's now take the lid off, and I'll show you inside. Because of that entry point on the back, I can charge it. I can take out my MP3 player. I can do everything I need, so I very, very rarely have to get into the back of the chest box. So this is not a regular occurrence at all. So through the back here, I'll pull it out so you can see, got my little MP3 player, and I've also got my USB charger for the speaker itself. Both of those come out, so I can plug it in and I don't have to take the backs off. But for the purposes of today, I am going to take the back off just so you can see what is inside. There we go. So friends, in here, it is a little bit of a rat's nest. So what I have is two things going on. One is the lights. This is just a little lighting board that I found on Etsy. A guy was making these. The programming was already done, so I didn't have to do it all myself. But it's powered by just a 9-volt square battery, and it goes to this, and I have a little on and off switch on the back of here that I can access from the outside of my chest box to turn that on and on. So that's what's going on there. The second thing I've got on here is the speaker. Now, what I do with the speaker is this is just an Acre regular amp. I took it out of the box and I just glued it in with a glue gun. And you can see the mechanics are all at the top. The little wheel turns it on and off. So I'm able to access that when I'm dressed up. If I want to turn it up a bit, turn it down a little bit, I can do that. Because the charging point is all in here, I can run that out through this hole. The speaker's there. Now, I'd love to put a larger speaker in. The battery's all in here as well. Now, I can put a larger speaker in if I like, because the way that they do their Acre amps, actually, you can just unplug it and plug it back in. But I won't be doing that for this version. I'll do that probably for a later version. But what I've done is I've just hot glued all of that inside. Bit of trial and error, working out where I wanted to put it so it would all work. But it's all attached to the back of this chest box, and then it all connects in. So let me just pop all of that back. You don't need to be highly skilled in electronics, particularly when it came to the little lights. The lights that flash in that particular order for Empire Strikes Back, you do not need to be highly skilled in electronics to do that. That is just a little kit that I picked up from Etsy. I couldn't tell you how much I spent on it, but it did not cost the earth. I can't screw those in while talking. It's not going to work. But that's all clipped in place anyway. There we go. So that is my chest box. Now, I can't show you it working. My MP3 player is dead. You would normally hear the breathing coming from this. And it really does add to that effect. So, how to print, how everything goes inside, the speaker. I'm just using a regular old Apple MP3 player. Talk about paint for a moment. Now, I can't show you the brass paint that I use on the two brass parts at the bottom. But you can pick up brass paint, I'm sure. The couple of things that I use. I love painting lots of my trooping things with blackboard paint. Why? It has a really even covering. It's a nice thicker paint that doesn't run, and it creates a really nice matte coat. If you want something that's high gloss, that's not a problem, because I then end up using on top of that whichever I want to clear. So this is a clear gloss coat. So things like my shin guards were then covered in this, and it gave a really nice glossy coat. And I did about 3 coats of that on here. When I did this one, I put a clear satin coat on, so it makes the paint nice and satin. Underneath the paint, we've used the spray putty. We've then sanded it down to get rid of all of those print lines. I've then used just regular grey primer. The primer, good decent primer, will allow you to do a really good paint job on your chest box. So that's the paints I've used. I used the vinyl to do the covering. They're not hand painted, that's just vinyl. We've talked about the printing of the box. We've talked about the greeblies. I may well now make a video of me making this up. I haven't decided if I'm going to do that quite yet. That may occur. But everything that you need that I have to give you, you'll find in the notes, and you'll be able to download those from my Dropbox and have access to all the print files in the different versions that I have, depending on how I wanted to print it and how I wanted it to work. So there's different backs and there's different fronts. So you take your pick on which would work for you. There we go. I think that is everything to do with my Vader chest box. No, there's one last thing. So the final thing is I kept finding that my chest box was going wonky, and that was really irritating me. So what I then did was I put 2 poppers, regular decent poppers, onto the leather. Those poppers then attach into my chest armor, shoulder armor, and then it stays straight because it's then straight because I know that those poppers are there, and it just hangs nice. So I don't do it as tight as I used to do it. I used to have it really tight, but with the tightness it would just skew. So it now just hangs, and I do the leather around my waist. It's comfortable, it's not tight, it's got a little bit of give in it, and that, because of the weight of it then, and those 2 poppers, that then holds in shape. That was the way that I worked out how to do my chest armour to keep it square. Friends, I hope that was helpful for you Vader nerds out there. If you've got a chest box, I would love to see how you've done it. If you've done any videos on how you put it together, I'd love to see that as well. Any thoughts? Anything that you would do differently? I definitely want to hear it. Stick it in the show notes. Stick it in the chat. Hey, I'm nearly approaching 1,000 subs as well. So if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel. That'd be very cool if I could get to 1,000. I'd be really impressed, with a cosplay channel like this to get to 1,000. So join me if you are up for seeing more videos like this. So subscribe, share, and all of that malarkey. But cosplayers, particularly you Vader cosplayers out there, can't wait to see what you put together. Until next time, enjoy making and enjoy cosplay.